star pictures here. Imagine all of us here are smiling faces, and or just pay attention to us. But so today's launch on anything on Atom, we're going to look at this from the perspective of those contributing to the space from the tool sets, those who are utilizing this in terms of launching chains, and a little bit of the inner workings of what it takes for us to build on Atom. And we're going to do that from a few verticals here. So we're going to look at front end, we're going to dive into back end and tooling and infra, as well as liquidity, and then kind of round it out with interop. So I'm Rich, I'm protocol lead with Masari Protocol Services. We'll go down the line here, everyone do a quick intro, and then we'll jump in.
Perfect. I go first. Hi, everybody. My name is Milos. I'm the business development lead for the Cosmos Hub. My primary focus right now is the development and basically project attraction for projects like, for tooling like, products like Forge and Hydro. We launched Forge on Monday, so finally our long-awaited ICS has a face, which is basically a front end right now. We added a couple of new features, so adding a permissionless ICS was basically the main highlight. Unfortunately, Hydro will have to wait a little bit longer before we deal with some of the technical obstacles. That's it.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Noam. I work at Binary Builders. I lead the business development team for the Interchain stack. We do this work for the Interchain Foundation. We also run the Interchain Builders program. And I guess in my free time, I've been, pretty much obsessed with trying to address some of the key issues that we're seeing in the Cosmos Hub and developing products that I think bring value to the broader Cosmos ecosystem and maybe even the broader Web3 ecosystem. Excited to talk about it today.
Hey everyone, I'm Vishal, one of the co-founders of Stride. Stride is a liquid staking protocol for app chains. We serve tokens like Atom, DYDX, TIA, Osmo, kind of the whole host of Cosmos app chains. I've been focused for the last 2.5 years on unlocking liquidity in Cosmos and excited to keep going.
Awesome. So let's kick this off. Let's go through a little bit. We'll go very top level here. Launching a chain. What does it take from building the Genesis files, the code base, up through picking your validator sets and everything? What's some of the difficulties through that, and what are some solutions today?
Well, right now, I believe with the launch of Forge and permissionless ICS, we kind of simplified this approach very much. The idea is to basically send one transaction which will contain the patterns of your chain, and basically that should be enough for you to kick off and spin up your chain. So obviously, we are working relentlessly on the side of basically making it even more simple and even more automated. Yeah? So this is something that is typical for Forge. Obviously, right now I kind of feel that the biggest question for projects is which architecture should they choose. Right now you can be adapt, which is like a smart contract right now, and you can choose either to be deployed on Cosmos Hub or potentially on some of the permissionless Cosmos platforms like Neutron. And you have ICS, which is like a full-blown chain. I kind of feel that right now with Halo coming soon to the market, you will have more options to choose on what kind of architecture is best fit for your use case as a product.
Yeah, I think it's pretty well understood, I think, in the broader space that the Cosmos tech stack or the Interchain stack is probably the best tech stack to build a blockchain. I think this is, it's almost undeniable, I would say. But the challenges lie, and I think you can speak to this a lot more because you've actually launched a chain. And Binary, we help people launch chains, but you've really been working hard on that. But I think I can imagine, and I know that a lot of the issues when it comes to getting your validators is still quite a manual process, right? So I'm imagining a marketplace for this. I think this would be very valuable. Maybe I'll put it on this. Maybe how about you tell me about how the chain launch went and what the issues were, and then maybe I'll go and say, hey, this is what I think the optimal framework is. How about we do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That sounds great. Yeah, so I totally agree with everything that's said so far. Forge has really simplified the process quite a bit, and the Cosmos SDK, I think, remains the most versatile stack to launch a chain. But I think, unfortunately, there is quite a lot of complexity in launching a chain. So running through end-to-end. So you start off, you have your code, your GitHub repo, that should function. Assume you already have that to start. When you want to create a genesis for a chain, you have to create a genesis file. So it gives all the parameters for your chain name, what your token is, what your initial balance distribution is, your inflation schedule, et cetera. Generate that. Then you have to go source a validator set. So you define, depending on your chain, like 50 to 150, 200 validators. Get them to all kind of agree at once that they agree on like a time to launch the chain. You have to make sure all the validators will submit something called like a GenTX file. Not getting too into the weeds, just a validator ahead of time will like sign a transaction that says, yes, I want to validate this chain. You distribute that to all the validators. You have to collect them and then distribute it again. So there's like a two-step process there. Then you actually have the genesis itself, which is all the validators will start running the node software. They'll generate blocks. But you're not done yet. You then have to like provide RPC nodes for like your front ends or other people that actually use your application. Sometimes validators will provide this. Sometimes people outsource this to third parties or run it in-house. There's kind of the whole gambit. Then you have to also run relayers because it's a Cosmos chain. So you have to spin up IBC relayers. So let's say you launch XYZ chain. You want to go from XYZ chain to Osmosis, to the hub, to Stride, and a variety of other chains. And then I would say you have like the bare bones functionality of a chain right now. Forge has simplified this greatly. So this whole process of validators generating a GenTX file is doing that. All that kind of complexity has been abstracted away, and you can kind of just get, you can bootstrap a set from even one validator from the Cosmos Hub, or 10, 20, 30, whatever you want. But I think there is still some work to be done in reducing the technical overhead, both in like defining your Genesis file, but then also the relayers, RPC nodes, et cetera. I think it's still a little bit challenging for a lot of small projects.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what would be valuable here is to imagine what would that ideal workflow look like. I'm picturing it as this. You're a chain developer. You're building maybe with a tool like Spawn or something else, Ignite, whatever you want to use. That interfaces with maybe some kind of front end that we should be building. Ideally, you just log in with maybe your wallet or something. You connect, or you pick a VM. Let's say it's EVM, Cosm, Wasm, MoveVM, Solana, whatever you want. Or there you go. Or you point to your GitHub repo. And then you go to the next config website where it's like, all right, Genesis configuration, where are my tokens, where are they going? Maybe then there's like a validator marketplace where you say, hey guys, I'm gonna need this many validators. Can you come in and like offer some bids, show me your reputation, all that stuff. Same for the relayers, same for the RPC node providers. I think ideally this works just like Netlify or Vercel. So for the developers out there who know, of course, what I mean, that's a really just like click, 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 and boom, my chain is live. That's on the front end side and the tooling side. I think we can also do a lot more on the back end side in the way that we think about how to build a chain. I think not a whole lot of people yet know about the idea of Halo, which is a concept of launching essentially what's called a light chain, which would make the process a ton more easy, which will also remove the need for proof of stake cost. I think that's another big issue in the space right now, where we're paying a lot of like inflation for proof of stake. Whether or not you use restaking or not, there are still ways to optimize on the operational cost for a chain. So there's a lot of opportunities here to build something, and I'm sure we will also. So.
Yeah, totally agree with all that. Maybe one shout out to a company I think has done this really well, not inside Cosmos, but just in crypto in general, Conduit. Highly recommend everyone here check out the Conduit website if you're interested in like blockchains or launching a blockchain. Truly takes like 2 minutes to launch a chain, and it's like really you click little buttons like a high schooler could launch a chain on Conduit. And I think we're getting there in Cosmos. I think the stack in Cosmos is a little bit more complicated, so it'll take a little bit more time.
Yeah.
But we're definitely making good progress.
Vishal, what was maybe one of the more cumbersome or just call it obnoxious portions of trying to bootstrap and bring Stride to market?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think there are two things particularly that were a little bit challenging right at launch. The first is coordinating with validators is actually very challenging because validators are very globally distributed. You have to find a time when every validator can commit to having like a few engineers ready. And so it sounds relatively easy, but it's actually like a very hard coordination problem because you might have like 50 validators, each of them needs like 1 or 2 engineers. Coordinating all that, shockingly hard, and Forge simplifies this quite a bit. The second thing that I think is still not that solved in Cosmos is the relayer aspect. So once you launch a chain, your chain's only useful if it can connect to other chains for the most part. And in Cosmos, you have to basically spin up like 10 to 20 relayers right at Genesis. And you have to make sure all those packets can be relayed in a high quality way at launch, make sure none of them go down. And that I think is actually quite a big pain point for new projects.
Yeah.
Yeah, even in past life, I was with on the Notifer side, so that speaks to me a little bit of the launching, the organizing, the validator sets, because there's going to be that one region of that poor guy who's up at 2 a.m. trying to help launch his chain, and it's the coordination aspect of it is it's very interesting and just one of those it's one of those minute details that could really slow everything down. I mean, your chain's not getting up.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. I remember when the Stride Genesis was happening, like an hour before we're getting all the files from all the validators, And there was one validator like couldn't get the file quite right, and we're going back and forth like, I don't know if you can make it Genesis, but validator is also like, it's exciting to be part of Genesis. And if you have a large enough validator set, someone's going to have some technical difficulty, and there's a lot of complexity here. One point of clarification, maybe, I actually not launched the strategy chain. The validators launched the strategy chain, and we merely helped them, create Genesis.
Absolutely. So, Noam, you started diving into a little bit of Halo, so kind of going into the infra, the back-end side of things. Let's talk a little bit about what you're envisioning there.
Yeah, so the simple version is that we want to make it so that a developer can essentially easily launch something that has the same power and configurability and probably better performance than the Cosmos SDK and the chains that we're seeing right now. We basically just want to take away the complexities that are involved with proof of stake. We can go into the details of how that technically would work. I think it's interesting to sort of look at how other ecosystems are doing. I think the roll-up frameworks are very interesting. I think proof of authority is a very interesting thing. What Halo is something that is, I don't think we've seen it yet. It's a little bit different in how that would function. This is why I'd like to call these things light chains. The key here is also that part of that relayer complexity, we want to enshrine the relayer inside the light chain. So that means that when you launch the light chain, you are automatically relaying because there is some sort of settlement happening through the Cosmos Hub. And so this is interesting. I think there are also other approaches where we can serve not just Halo light chains or ICS chains. We could serve all of Cosmos, where I feel like we could build a relayer marketplace. That's the simple version of it, or even a relayer network where the chain itself functions as a relayer to all the other networks, where literally you just say, hey, I need to go to that connection. How much do I need to pay for that? And then you agree, and then boom, your connection is good.
Yeah, totally agree. I think we're actually not that far from having a relayer marketplace. I think theoretically you could have like tips on IBC packets,
right?
And then the first relay them gets the tip. And I think it's actually like not that far from reality. I'd expect we're going to get there relatively soon.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is like, when we're talking about all this stuff, the way I sort of picture the Cosmos Hub, because we're always talking about narrative and like what's important here. And in this lens, it sounds to me that the Hub is actually a blockchain as a service provider, if you think about it. And there's probably more to it. There are other topics that we'll probably be talking about that are part of that as well. But I think this is an interesting way to frame the Cosmos Hub and to position ourselves.
Now, and from that relayer standpoint, you're saying integrating that into part of the stack, it was that kind of the aha moment of this is something we need and let's build and start conceptualizing around this, or?
Yeah, well, yeah, the way I look at product and the way I look at any sort of like business that you're trying to set up, and let's be real, the Cosmos Hub is actually a business if you think about it. It's a community, sure, it's a token, it's all these things, but it's also a business. And when it's kind of like the Apple thing, right? They say, instead of like, look at all these tech that we have, let's build something really cool. I want to look at it the other way around, which is like, look at these problems that people have, let's try to solve them. And I think that's the only angle that we should focus on, because once you start solving problems, you bring value to customers, to developers, to retail, whatever, and now that value will usually translate into value capture at some point, right? But that's maybe at a later stage. That's how I look at product, that's how I look at how we should approach the vision for the Cosmos Hub. Yeah.
Absolutely. So to keep things going kind of within this infra and tooling side, let's talk a little bit, two things here. One, some of the costs associated of maintaining and launching these chains. What do you have to be most careful or at least pertinent to? And then from there, also going into, let's talk a little bit of modularity and maybe the Celestia integration as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's a few costs in operating a chain. So the first and foremost is the cost of validators to actually operate the network. It depends on validator and their setup, but estimate something like $600,000 is like the bare minimum for a validator to like operate a node on a network profitably, or even at cost. And so depending on how many validators you have 100 validators, you're talking about like 100K a month just to kind of keep those nodes up and online. With Forge, you can operate on far fewer validators, but that's like one very primary cost. You have the cost of the relayers, which we've already talked about a little bit, like the infra of actually running the relayers, and also you have to fund the gas for the relayers. That can add up, in our experience, it can be like a few $1,000s a month if you're maintaining lots of relayers. And then one kind of hidden cost is you often also want to maintain archive nodes or RPC and LCD. Like basically, you want to maintain access to your blockchain state to the public. So our front ends or whatever can hit that. A lot of validators and community members will run RPC and LCD endpoints for free. But often, some people run archive nodes as well, but often teams will want to have backup archive nodes. These actually can be quite large. A lot of Cosmos chains have over 10 terabytes of state today. And having a node that can handle all that is quite challenging. Like, as an example, I think GCP and AWS don't even give you large enough nodes or storage space to store all of that on one machine. So you often have to do like more complicated setups or do something on bare metal. That can end up being a few $1,000s a month as well.
Great. So what led into that? So to keeping that in mind, what kind of led you to go with the DA route of involving Celestia?
Yeah, absolutely. So for us in particular, it was less a cost measure and more a safety measure. So at Stride, we always prioritize safety over liveness. It's been a kind of core principle at Stride ever since we launched, and I think it will continue to be forever. Always want to make sure liquid staking is like as safe as possible. And as we launched STTO, one piece of feedback we got was how can you align the security of that product, like STTO, closer with the Celestia base layer, so they have very similar trust properties. And it has very high trust properties right now because we have ICS with the Cosmos Hub. But we're exploring a vision with Strangelove that would basically allow you to post data to Celestia and then still use the Cosmos Hub for basically consensus or to generate blocks. And then if either the data on Celestia wasn't posted or the blocks weren't generated, the chain would stop. And it kind of gives you the max of the two securities. So it kind of aligns a little bit better. You can also imagine a world, though, where validators don't have to store data locally, and instead they can pull it all from Celestia, which could theoretically decrease their node costs. But I think this is still a little bit theoretic right now.
Gotcha. And I guess one more point to round this out. When you're factoring in, you're going through some of the costs of the validator side, is that having a major impact into, say, your tokenomics model of having to adjust emissions accordingly based on what we're hoping for in terms of what token is in the market? Is that a large factor, minimal, somewhere in between?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely a very important factor. So when we think of like what emissions should be like, or how validators should get like a commission or get paid, it definitely, like we get feedback from validators all the time on, hey, the commissions or like the yields are too low, or the yields are actually really great. We're all, everyone's super happy, and that definitely like changes how you think about how you might want to make tokenomics changes. So if all the validators are saying, hey, it's really hard to run the chain right now, we're not getting that much commission, you might want to think about redirecting revenue to validators, maybe like enforcing a min commission that's much higher, because right now I think validators feel some pressure to lower commissions to stay competitive. If you enforce like a high commission, then validators can safely like get more revenue for themselves. At Stride, we direct all the Stride protocol revenue, or the protocol directs all of its revenue to stakers and validators. And so I think right now validators are relatively happy, but it's always something on our minds when we're thinking about tokenomics.
Awesome. So let's look a little bit let's shift towards liquidity here. So we've theoretically launched this network. We're getting some TVL, some user fee, some active users, transactional fees. What are some things what are options in terms of liquidity within the Cosmos space, and what is some ideas of how to navigate that?
Yeah, right now I think the way to go for the liquidity is basically utilizing the Hydra, which was supposed to be launched, I think, last week. Unfortunately, we had some technical difficulties. The idea around Hydra is to act as a liquidity export platform with an auction mechanism. So you have a two-sided market. On one side, you have atom holders who can stake their atom and receive voting power for the current round. On the other hand, you have projects which are competing for liquidity. So the idea is to kind of have a more structured and more transparent and more efficient way of exporting liquidity from the community pool. Right now, we have this kind of a cumbersome process of, I think, total almost 4 to 5 weeks, where you have 2 weeks on forum proposal, then 2 weeks on-chain voting. Projects are kind of guesstimating how much liquidity should they ask for, what kind of utilization strategy is going to get approved by the community, and we kind of feel that this is not the right way, and basically drives projects away from even applying for any type of liquidity export. So I think that Hydra basically is beneficial for all the projects inside the Cosmos space, for anyone who's seeking out a protocol on liquidity.
So not to sound too negative, but I think the model of Hydra needs some refining, particularly about what we're incentivizing here. So currently the way that, so for those who don't know how it works, you have a protocol that wants money and they make a bid, wants liquidity and they make a bid, and then the voters, atom holders that lock it up, they say, okay, this is where it's going to go. And what we're doing right now is those bids are going to go to those voters. And so what are we incentivizing here? We're actually incentivizing people to lock up their atom, that atom is not necessarily used for liquidity, it's just,
No.
it's locked up, right? So what I'm thinking is like, well, that's the wrong incentivization. We should be incentivizing liquidity, right? That seems much more important instead of paying these people. So what I'm trying to propose here as an alternative model that I think that we should be thinking about is that there are essentially there's a two-sided marketplace that functions a little bit differently. We have liquidity providers, which are farmers generally, and we have liquidity seekers, which are the protocols. And they both have different issues. The farmers have a discoverability issue. So they're always, and for those who are degens and farmers, you know that, you're like, where can I get the highest yield? And you're always like trying to optimize where to deploy your liquidity. And on the other side, you have the protocol seekers, and their issue is not discoverability, distribution. Their issue is distribution. So they're always like, well, how do I get my protocol in front of everyone's faces? How do I get the people to actually show up and provide the liquidity? So the way I'm thinking about it is like if you create the proper incentive structure, you create actually a marketplace where the one incentivizes the other. And I think that's where actually Hydro or some other liquidity platform could really play in. And I think is actually what we should be thinking and doing right now.
I mean, we can develop that, so it would be more of a commercial product in that case. So right now,
Yeah.
we are trying to solve the inefficiency of community pool distribution.
Yeah, and I totally,
And building up on all, yeah, I agree with you. I mean, the end goal would be...
It's a more ambitious, exactly.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
I think it's like, from a practical point of view, like as we, and maybe this comes down to also maybe some of the organizational issues and how we sort of go about things when it comes to designing products for the Cosmos Hub. You know, when we launch a product like this, we need to really do think about the big picture. And we shouldn't be like, oh, let's solve this small problem right now. Because if you think about it, we have maybe a couple $1 million that we can put into Hydro with a community pool, but what we really need is billions of dollars that enter the Cosmos ecosystem in some way. And so we need to start thinking big. And the moment we launch like small projects like this or smaller platforms, I think it's dangerous because you can not really go to market very effectively. You don't have a lot of control of what's happening because it's a small amount of money. So we need to launch big, we need to think big, we need to start big.
I absolutely agree with you. I mean, the whole idea right now is to kind of validate this approach. So we want to go big. I agree with you.
Okay, cool.
And obviously, Atom is not the only asset that should end up on Hydro. We want to have all the assets inside the Cosmos ecosystem, so you could bid for any type of token, basically.
Yeah.
But regarding the incentives, so the current model is your tributes, which are kind of posted by the projects who are competing for that liquidity, are distributed to the voters. There is a catch in that the exported liquidity needs to be returned. Obviously, it functions as a loan, and you need to provide some kind of a profit on top of it. So every protocol loan generated yield goes back to the Cosmos Hub community pool. We can expand on that. We do plan actually to add multiple features in the near future. We are currently in a test phase, or actually pilot rounds for now. We just want to validate this idea. But like I said, we are pretty much open for any suggestion, and we are collecting all the feedback from the community around how should Hydro develop in the future.
Yeah, let's definitely have that conversation. And it's not just the only way that we need to think about liquidity. I think one of the main issues why token volatility in Cosmos is maybe relatively slightly higher than in other ecosystems because a lot of that liquidity is locked up in stake. And that's a real issue because right now it's still much more attractive to stake your tokens than it is to put it in a liquidity pool. And I think that combined with the airdrop culture that we've had has basically created a culture of, cool, I'm just going to buy and I'm going to let it stake and do nothing. And essentially that doesn't really sort of like promote and grow a very active capital efficiency seeking community that wants to make money basically. And I think that's where like getting rid of proof of stake in some way, not for Atom obviously, we need to keep that, but like for smaller light chains is a good way to approach it. And then there's the fiat on-ramping situation where there's a whole other conversation, but I've got some ideas there. Maybe we can talk about that later.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally agree with all of that. I think Hydro is a good first step, and there's definitely lots of iterations to be done, like with any product that launches. One shout out I'd want to make to a protocol that's done this really well, Turtle Club. I don't know if you guys have heard of it or looked at it, but I would encourage everyone to kind of take a look. Incredible. They basically do exactly what you described, pairing yield farmers with protocols in a very elegant way. And I think they have over $1 billion of TVL today. It's been one of the most effective ways to kind of source liquidity.
Awesome. Yeah, and it's the simplicity aspect of that too, because I spoke with Essie and those guys. It's a great team, and it's just a single signing.
Yeah.
No issues in terms of the actual movement of collateral, like custody. You're all safe. It's a very interesting piece of this whole puzzle.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's no reason that a future version of Hydro and Cosmos or some way to get source liquidity in Cosmos couldn't look more like that. I mean, they've obviously spent years refining it and making it like incredible UX. And I think we can definitely learn a lot from their success.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. So appreciate it, guys. Let's move. I have no idea how we're doing on time, so let's talk a little bit of.
Okay.
Let's talk interop before we run out here. From the interoperability standpoint, obviously there's a lot of options in the space, and we have IBC here natively. But what is the current state of interop for us? Are we simply at a half-life of we're moved from these traditional bridges to now we have higher throughput and more safer options these days? Are we at the end game? Are we still a number of degrees of separation away from that? What are your guys' thoughts?
Definitely not at the end game. We have to go to the end game, but that's going to take a while. I think as long as people are still Googling how to bridge Bitcoin to TON and end up on some random website where you have some article that did SEO really well and you have 3 bridges, 2 of them are obsolete, and you go there and then we are relatively professional and like we know exactly what to do, and we still struggle with that. So imagine about retail, right? So that's already a problem. I think this issue can be sort of understood in 2 ways. There is the user-focused front-end kind of like perspective, and then there is the infrastructure perspective. On the infrastructure perspective, I think the Cosmos Hub can play a really critical role here. And for those who don't know, IBC, there's a new version coming out that's called IBC Eureka, which is a much lighter version, much easier to integrate, much easier to build. That's being deployed in the form of IBC Solidity contracts next year, at least that's the plan. Some chain will have to own these contracts. It shouldn't be a multi-sig, right? I think the Cosmos Hub is actually well suited to do this. Some infrastructure will also need to be run because in order to connect from L2 to Cosmos Hub or L2 to L1 or whatever, the bridge needs to be validated in some way. And so I think like the Cosmos Hub could play a role there. I think that we should. And then on the front end side of things, what we really should be doing, and I think that would be great to really partner with the Skip team because Skip's building an incredible user interface for and bridging APIs. What I really want to see is one beautiful bridging platform that just works with IBC, Layer 0, Wormhole, all the stuff in Chainlink and Circle and everything, Hyperlane, and your connection as well. And then basically just make that work for any route anywhere. And that's like, one is like a retail product. The second is a sort of like a B2B strategy where we start building SDKs that we can integrate with wallets, et cetera, websites and all these things. Now, I think that's a great way to solve real problems for retail and for businesses right now. So imagine we can go to Uniswap or Aave and we say, hey, you know what, if you import this widget, now you have a one-click deposit, not just from Ethereum or all the other spaces, but literally from every place in Web3. So if we do that, we can capture a lot of users. And then as we expand IBC, we can add those IBC routes in this thing. And it's a great way for distribution for IBC, actually. So I think that's like a strategy we should consider. Yeah.
So in short, IBC all the way.
Sorry?
IBC all the way, in short.
IBC all the way all in the long term, but also being also recognizing that might not be the outcome, right? And that's okay. But then still thinking about like how can we optimize for distribution of IBC and distribution of liquidity towards and outside and inside of the Cosmos ecosystem through a platform that supports all of this.
Yeah, I think we've seen a huge explosion in the quality of bridges and the quantity as well over the last couple of years. Like the number, like in 2018, it was like impossible to bridge around. Now there's tons of bridge solutions, and they all work like reasonably well. And I think as a result, the bar for being a good bridge has gone much higher. And you can imagine a world where IBC, doesn't really, it dominated. It was like the best bridging standard. Doesn't really evolve, and it gets like lapped by Layer 0 or Wormhole or Hyperlane or something else. But thankfully, I think we are seeing quite a lot of innovation and building on IBC, and it is like still pushing the market forward. It's by no means, I don't think we're not at the end game yet. So it's still like requires years of refining and making better. Like we still haven't deployed on Ethereum, although hopefully next year. Still haven't deployed IBC to Bitcoin, for example. Like there's so many places to grow with IBC. But I think we're definitely on the right path. But I do think all the bridges are in some way like serving slightly different niches. Like all of them want to bridge tokens, but like I think we were talking about this earlier, Layer 0 does all sorts of bridging beyond just tokens in a much more commercial way that's helpful for projects, like oracles, for example, or like sending information packets through. Hyperlane is nice because you can deploy to like the long tail of chains if you want to, or it's very permissionless. You can do it on like a wide variety of architectures. So I think we'll see like specialization in bridges, and then all of them will kind of keep pushing each other forward.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable assumption, absolutely.
Great. So it looks like we're probably very close to end time here. So any quick closing thoughts? Launch anything on Atom? We've covered a number of areas here. So really quick last moment for you all.
You can go first.
Well, I think what's important here is that this is all a lot of really good talk, right? It's like, oh, this is exciting. These sound like great ideas, but we have to go and build them. And we have to come to an agreement about what we're building and how we're doing that. I think this is honestly the largest challenge. And I think in the next panel at 3:30, we're going to talk about that a little bit more also with Bucky. And I forgot the, I'm so sorry. I forgot the other person.
The whole idea around
Yeah.
having Cosmos Hub the best place to launch a chain, we need to kind of support this narrative not only by the tech, but also with the environment. We need to make projects attracted to this ecosystem, and we can do this by lowering the drama on the first place and kind of creating a more appealing environment with tooling and services. I mean, launching your own chain is one step of each project journey. Like Vishal mentioned, you need relayers, you need explorers, you need bridges, you need oracles. If we could collect all of this and make it like a one point of contact for projects, that would be amazing. So each project would be able to handpick which type of services or additional tooling they need on top of their chain. So yeah, like Noam said, we need to work on it really hard.
Yeah, I mean, just to reiterate on that, like, I do think, and I think it's very important that we all really start recognizing this. Like, we need to fundamentally be able and open our minds to shift how we approach coming to an agreement on the Cosmos Hub, how we approach product design, how we approach vision and consensus. Like, we need to really, it's an organizational issue. It's partially also a governance issue, but it's also mostly an organizational issue. Like, I think this is actually the biggest existential threat to what we're doing here. And I really feel that we've prematurely decentralized. That's how I sort of describe the issue primarily. And we need to be courageous enough to want to change that as a community.
Last thing I would say, you guys should all go check out the Forge website. It's live right now. You can go launch a chain on it today if you want to.
Thank you all.